Hello, welcome to the Manasplained podcast. I'm Connor. Today I'll be talking about the deck I built for Halfdane. Now, Halfdane's weird, because normally just a 4-mana 3/3, which is nothing. But at the beginning of your upkeep, you may have his power and toughness become a different creature's power and toughness until your next upkeep. So if you have a really big creature out, Halfdane can also be that big. It doesn't get any of the abilities or anything. It's not like a clone. It just like copies of power and toughness. It's very weird. This card could fit well in some decks, maybe if you're trying to do that kind of stuff. But the way I tried to design the deck was filling up the graveyard, have Lurgoyf type creatures that their power and toughness is based off graveyard sizes and stuff like that, and then use those powers and toughnesses to differing effects. Sacrifice thing to do this or that, the other thing. The deck also has a heavy mill theme because of that, and some recursion, because if you mill any of the creatures like a Mordivore, for example, you're going to want to be able to get them back, so there is recursion for stuff like that. The deck is a little weak and it's a little weird, but I really wanted to try to find an interesting way to get Halfdane's ability to actually see some use, and I think this is an interesting way to do that, so I hope you enjoy the deck. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and share this video with your friends. Love to grow the channel, love to have you along for the ride. Love talking down in the comments with you guys after these videos go up. You guys always have interesting things to say, whether about certain cards in the deck itself, or cards I should have put in. But yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments below. So for the deck breakdown, it's 8 theme, 4 subtheme, 10 synergy, 0 protection, 25 mill. So you'd think the mill would be the theme, and realistically it kind of is, but the mill just kind of lets the theme work, and the theme, like I said, is cards like Mordivore, the Lurgoyf-like effects where the power and toughness is equal to number of creatures in all graveyards, stuff like that. The sub-theme just kind of goes along with those kinds of things, and then the synergy is more of the recursion and stuff like that, just some more synergistic cards, and like I said, 0 protection. So along with that, we have 6 draw, 8 ramp, 9 removal, 3 board wipes, and 36 lands. The draw, the ramp, the removal, the theme, the sub-theme, all of it is very low, but when you put together the fact of the recursion stuff in the synergy package plus all the mill, it kind of makes up for that. You don't need as much draw in a mill deck because your graveyard acts as like a pseudo hand, so you don't need as much card draw. Would have liked to have more ramp and more removal, especially since we're in Esper colors. Removal is premium in those colors, but I also had to shy away from some of the really good removal that exiles, because I want stuff to go to graveyards so that I can do some stuff with it, like increase my creature's powers and toughness and so on. But this deck has 10 crossover cards, finally a number that I like to see. Unfortunately, all the other categories have pretty low number counts, but at least it has 10 crossover cards. So for the theme breakdown, again, it's just Lurgoyf-like effects, but since we're not in green, we don't get Tarmogoyf, like the most well-known Lurgoyf, and so because of that, I kind of had to really go digging, and luckily black has a lot of graveyard-themed Lurgoyfs that are very powerful. So these 3 are all creature-based power and toughnesses. Cruel Somnophage and Mordivore are basically the same because its power and toughness is equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. Mordivore can regenerate itself, which is cool, but Cruel Somnophage only costs 2 mana, and it also has an adventure on it to make someone mill 4 cards. Cruel Somnophage is kind of insane, very awesome card. And then an even stronger card, Consuming Aberration. Its power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyard, so this thing gets huge fast. And whenever you cast a spell, each opponent will reveal cards until they find a land, and then put all of those cards into the graveyard. Yeah, Consuming Aberration gets ginormous, and it's its own engine to get bigger and bigger and bigger. This card is ridiculous. I would love to run it as a commander, because I think that would be hilarious and awesome. But yeah, these cards are nuts. Especially Consuming Aberration. I've always wanted to run it in a deck. I've just never had a Dimir deck where milling like your opponents, I've never had a deck that really cares about doing that, but I'm finally glad I get to put it in a deck because this card is awesome. I know a lot of people love it and hate it. A card from the new set that's in this category, Ancient One. Ancient One's a 2-mana 8/8, so your commander can be an 8/8 when you then the turn after you cast it, when you get this guy out before him, because it's only 2 mana, which is wild. Also lets you have an ability to draw cards, discard, and then make people mill. Very cool. A lot of inherent synergy built in. The thing about the Ancient One is it can't attack or block unless you have 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard. And Descending and the Descend mechanic, it's new, it's an interesting mechanic from Last Caverns of Ixalan, because of some other mechanics that require like permanents dying or permanents going to the graveyard, stuff like that. If you had tokens, it's kind of like a very easy way to have something die without really losing a lot. Say it was just like a treasure token or a clue token, you're sacrificing them anyways to get value, so you get that inherent value out of them. But with Descending, you need a permanent card, so like a land that you sacrifice to go find another land, that would count, or when you mill a bunch of creatures or something like that. So yeah, I really like the new Descend mechanic and how that all works, and it makes the Ancient One a very good card in this deck. And then Soul of Eternity, you might recognize it's a slightly different version of Serra Avatar. Serra's Avatar, power and toughness is equal to your life total. It's a very hard casting cost because it's 4 and 3 white. Those 3 white pips are very hard to do in a 3-color deck. I have an Oloro deck that's also Esper, and I run Bolas' Citadel in it. And getting the 3 black pips for Bolas' Citadel sometimes just takes a while. And so because of that, I felt like running Soul of Eternity instead, because it also has the power and toughness equal to your life total, easier casting costs, and you can encore it out from your graveyard if you wanted to, if you're not recurring it with something else. So yeah, another couple cards that are awesome in the set: Ancient One early game, Soul of Eternity late game. And then the last couple cards here: Bone Microdrax, power and toughness equal to the number of other creature cards in your graveyard. So it's not going to be super big, but it's only 3 mana, so it also has a way to scavenge it from your graveyard, put 1/1 counters equal to its power onto target creature. So you get like 5 or 6 creatures in your graveyard. You could scavenge Microdrax to put those counters on your commander. So it's a kind of like a permanent little stat bump, even when you're having to do upkeep triggers of him getting his power and toughness equal to someone else. That's awesome. Souls of the Lost, 2 mana for again, another Lurgoyf effect. You have to sacrifice something or discard a card when you cast it, but at the same time, you get to discard stuff, and it's great. And its number of permanent cards in your graveyard is what it's equal to. So you have a bunch of lands and creatures, enchantments, blah, blah, blah in there. It gets very big, very fast, and it being a 2/2, that's crazy. And then Sewer Nemesis is a classic. You choose a player, and its power toughness equal number of cards in their graveyard. And whenever the chosen player casts a spell, they mill a card. So, Sewer Nemesis, you want to target yourself if you want to mill a bunch. You could target an opponent, maybe they're already doing like a loot style deck. Maybe they have a cycling deck or a self-mill deck. You target them with Sewer Nemesis, and then Sewer Nemesis gets massive. So the sub-theme is really interesting. I was looking for clone-like effects when I originally started making the deck, because the commander clones stuff. It just clones power and toughness, but doesn't get any other effects. So I was thinking, well, maybe I'm not going to make this a clone tribal deck, because the commander doesn't really do that, and I wanted to use his ability more efficiently in more cool ways. So I decided to make the sub-theme graveyard clones. So all these cards have different ways of cloning stuff from graveyard. Lazavd in your Mastermind, whenever a creature card is put into opponent's graveyard from anywhere, it can become a copy of it. It also is hexproof, and it keeps that ability, so it is a pretty restrictive casting cost, 2 blue, 2 black. But if you're killing your opponent's creatures, they're milling them, discard them, whatever, you could have Lazavd become a copy of that. And it's until you want to change it again. So Lazavd could become a copy of something massive, and it'd be absolutely awesome. Body double, 5 mana clone of a copy of a card in the graveyard, fantastic. Shadowkin gets your opponents to mill, which helps with the whole mill theme, which is great. And then the one non-bow it does is it does exile from the cards you milled with it, which is kind of unfortunate, but at the same time, you do get to copy the exiled card that you milled. So you still get that benefit back, and if you're milling like a really powerful creature, you'd rather have it than it sit in the graveyard. Just give a +1/+1 bump to one of your Lurgoyf-like cards. So Shadowkin is still very good to have in this deck. And then Cemetery Puka, wild card, similar to Lazavd in your Mastermind. The creature has to enter a graveyard from play, so it has to die. You can't just mill it, which is unfortunate. But you pay 1, it becomes a copy of it, and it's very easier to cast than a Lazavd because it's 1 and then 2 hybrid Dimir. So 1 blue blue, or 1 black black, or 1 blue black. Very easy to cast. And yeah, you can also copy your own creatures when they go into the graveyard if one of your creatures dies. So again, all of these cards, I really like this sub-theme. I think it's very interesting, and I think it works really cool with what this deck's trying to do. So the synergy category has a little bit of recursion, a little bit of some other stuff. Really just helps out with the whole kind of what you're trying to do with this deck, with the power bump for your commander, and then all the milling and recursion-y stuff. The strongest card in this category, and probably one of the strongest cards in the deck, Sir Conrad. I played a game the other day, maybe a week ago now, where this was someone's commander. And the fact that they played like Gravelighter or something, or one of those cards that when it enters the battlefield, everybody sacrifices a creature like Plaguecrafter, Fleshbag Marauder, something like that. It dealt 4 damage to everybody. He played a creature that made everybody sacrifice a creature, then we all took 4 damage. Like 12 damage to the board, plus removing 3 creatures. And that was with Sir Conrad at the helm and like building the deck more towards that. But with this deck doing so much mill, Sir Conrad's going to be dishing out so much damage. He has a 2 mana, each player mills a card on him, which I don't know how often you're going to use. I didn't add him to the mill category for that reason, because activating that ability to mill, probably not going to do that. You have some other mill effects, and you want to actually be spending your mana on casting stuff instead of just dumping it into that ability. But nearing the end of the game, people have life totals are kind of low. You're kind of running out of gas in your hand, and then you still have a bunch of mana because you're in the late game. You can just pump mana in Sir Conrad and then get the last points of damage in that way. Yeah, this card is ridiculous, and I wish I saw... I'm glad I don't see it more, but I also wish I saw it more, because like this card deserves a lot more respect than I feel like a lot of people give it, given how much damage this card can dish out. It's ridiculous. Because not only is it when a creature enters the graveyard from anywhere, it's whenever a creature leaves the graveyard. Like, this card is insane. Like, oh my god. So, some ways to use the power and toughness of your commander that you're stealing from other creatures, or just to utilize those creatures in other ways that are interesting, are these 3 cards. They all sacrifice a creature, and then based off its power, they do something interesting. So, Bloodshed Fanatic deals X damage to opponent, you gain X life, where X is that power. Ghoul-Caller Gisa makes X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, and then Shadowheart draws you X cards, where X is that creature's power. So all of these cards really work well in this kind of deck. Ghoul-Caller Gisa, I'm building a zombie token, zombie tribal deck for myself, based with her at the helm, and she's insane. She's nuts. 5 mana is absolutely fair for a card like this, because when you have her ability going, she just deals so much damage with all the tokens you can just push out onto the board. All these cards are ridiculous. Ghoul-Caller Gisa probably the most so. Some recursion in the deck, Sheoldred being one of the most typical recursion pieces maybe ever printed in Magic. Everyone knows it, everyone hates it, because it makes people sacrifice, then you get to bring stuff back. All the Praetors are pretty mean. Sheoldred's probably the second or third meanest, I don't know. All of the non-red Praetors are all super mean in their own right, but Sheoldred is such a prolific card. Everyone knows it. Sun Titan, another amazing card, except everyone loves this card. No one really hates it, I don't think. Can let you get back lands or permanents with CMC, 3 or less from a graveyard to the battlefield. Sun Titan just puts in so much work in every deck I've ever put it in, because even if they kill it, you still get that ETB off. You can still get an important piece back, still get a land, it could ramp you something. And if they don't kill it, you get that attack, you get to ramp again, you get to get something else back. Like, Sun Titan is insane and one of my favorite cards. I love running this card in any deck that has white, just because of the sheer amount of value it can garner. And then Captain Ingathrod, I think, is really interesting, because he gives horrors you control menace. And because of how I'm running the deck, some of those cards in the theme, some of those creatures are horrors, so that's kind of cool. And whenever a horror you control deals combat damage to a player, the player mills that many cards, so again, some horror stuff going on there. I would kind of love to make a horror tribal deck with Captain. I think that'd be really cool. And at the beginning of your end step, you get to bring a card that was put into the graveyard that turn back onto the battlefield from a library of an opponent you're against. So you do get some recursion there. It's not your own stuff, unfortunately, but hopefully you mill some pretty cool stuff, and you get to take it as yours now. Get to snake it like a good old pirate. All these cards are awesome, and yeah, they're so cool. And Captain is just a very unique card. I love what they did with them. And for the last cards of this category, 2 of the Primordials. They're insane. With all the milling you're doing, you're going to want to get these guys out and have them doing their thing. Sepulchral gets to bring a creature back from everybody's graveyard. Diluvian Primordial gets to bring back an instant or sorcery from every opponent's graveyard. They're both only opponents. But because of that, you get to cast a bunch of crap with Diluvian that could absolutely win you a game. You mill out somebody's extra turn spell. Maybe you milled their Expropriate or some other crazy, nasty instant or sorcery that exiles itself because it's too powerful. You get to cast it with Diluvian Primordial, and you get to absolutely wreak havoc. Sepulchral Primordial, same thing. Maybe you're up against like a dino deck or something, you get some cool dinosaurs or just some really awesome value pieces. Sepulchral does crazy work there. And then Breach the Multiverse is a newish card. It's from this year, where last year when this video comes out, that just is a house. Like, it mills 40 cards total. And then you get to pick a creature planeswalker from everybody's graveyard. Not put there from Breach, just in general. So even if you don't hit anything with the Breach, they'll probably already have something in there that you want. Like, oh my god. You could get 4 planeswalkers with this. And then just start going off. Like, this card is ridiculous. Like, it's so insane. I just love, like, this card. It just does so much work. I've seen it a few times in some gameplay channels, and the amount of havoc it wreaks on the board, whenever someone casts it, everyone just goes, oh god, oh please no. And then they get a bunch of random crap. Like, maybe they'll get a Sepulchral Primordial, so they get to get even more stuff for a Diluvian or something like that. Like, Breach the Multiverse is absolutely ridiculous. So the mill category, like I said, 25 cards. It's a big chunk of the deck, but that's because I wanted the mill to be ongoing and very consistent. I wanted the mill in this category or in this deck to hit all of your opponents. I didn't really like targeted mill as much, because when you're up against 3 opponents, you want to mill them all out because you have an increased likelihood to hit creatures and other stuff that you want to hit. So I hope you like the mill category. I like the cards I added, and I hope you do too. So you already saw Breach the Multiverse, but Mind Grind and Fractured Sanity are more great mill cards. Like I said, I don't want mill cards that just target an opponent. I want to hit everybody. I wanted to share the mill love. So Mind Grind's great because it's an X card, so it can be whatever you want it to be at that moment. And then each player mills cards until they reveal X lands, and then all those cards go into the graveyard. It's great. X can't be 0, which, I mean, obviously, but at the same time, like, if you say like 6 for the X, so it costs 8 mana, everyone's going to mill a ton of cards, or they're going to hit 8 lands off the top. Either way, Mind Grind going to help dump a ton of cards into players' graveyards, especially if players are running lower land counts. It's going to punish them for doing that, which is great. Fractured Sanity, another kind of nuts card for 3 blue mana, which is a pretty restrictive casting cost. You still get everybody to mill 14 cards for 3 mana, which is like such insane value. That's wild. That's what, 42 cards milled for 3 mana? Just kind of nuts. Some more repeatable mill. Ruined Crab, whenever land enters, each opponent mills 3 cards, so every land's 9 cards in the bin. Phoenix would let your commander tap to mill, which is so cool if you get your commander pretty big, because you have another effect out that has a large creature. You can tap them both and then get people milling more cards. Your creatures get bigger, so on and so forth. And then Dakon Shadow Slayer is kind of like self-mill with the Surveil, but later on, if you get him out and you have more than 6 lands out, you can immediately -6 him to get an artifact card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield, which could help if you mill out an important artifact that you need for something later. It's great. And also the exile target creature, it'd be better in this deck if it was destroy, but sometimes you need to exile stuff because it can be too problematic. Some more repeatable mill effects. Memory Erosion, whenever someone casts a spell, they mill 2. Psychic Corrosion, whenever you draw a card, each opponent mills 2. Alter Dementia, sack a creature like your big commander. Target player mills. I know that's target, but it's a way to use your commander's power in an interesting way. So I thought it'd be a good add here. And then I've already talked about Consuming Aberration and Captain. Both amazing cards, Consuming Aberration being an absolute house. Some more mill effects. Dreamborn Muse, This card's crazy. It punishes people for drawing cards, punishes people for, like, yeah, having massive hand sizes. And so they're going to not want to keep massive hand size because it's going to be a benefit to you by having their graveyards filled with stuff. But if they have low hand sizes, that means they're not going to have a lot of cards to answer what you're doing. It's this catch-22 that's fantastic. Who Caller's Bell, I know it's only 1 card per player, mill. But it is 1 mana, and then every turn 4 cards get milled total, which is great. Mesmeric Orb is another card that's hilarious. Whenever an impermanent becomes untapped, the player mills the card. So people are just every turn tapping all their lands, or they're swinging with creatures, blah, 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 all the ramp artifacts. You just get to, everyone has to keep pitching cards, and Mesmeric Orb can really get the job done. You already saw Shadowkin, another great card. Court of Cunning puts the Monarch into play, which will make people start swinging out and stuff, which is great. I love the Monarch. I really think all Commander games should start with the Monarch in the middle, because it just leads to a more interesting environment, because people are going to attack more often if the Monarch starts in the middle, because people are going to want to be drawing cards, and that leads to quicker games and more interesting games because people are interacting with each other more. And then Manic Scribe is just a wild card, because when it enters, each opponent mills 3. But then it has an upkeep trigger. If Delirium is met, each player that player will mill 3 cards. So it goes around the table, each upkeep people mill, and it'll mill so many cards. Like, all of these mill effects are super great, and again, I love Monarch. It's so much fun. I would be remiss if I didn't add a bunch of wheels to the deck. I didn't add any of the super expensive ones, but these ones I thought would work really well in the deck, because you're wanting to churn through people's decks. This is a very easy way to help with that. Whispering Madness being every time a creature you encipher it onto deals combat damage, you get to Windfall, classic Windfall. And then Jace's Archivist is a creature that you can tap to Windfall. Doing this over and over and over is really going to churn through people's hands. You're going to get some good stuff in the graveyard, whether it's theirs or yours, and really will help with all of the Lurgoyf-like effect. And then the last section of the mill category is the half of your library rounded up cards. These cards are crazy. Again, Traumatize and Cut Your Losses are target, as well as Terracian and Fleet Swallower, but it's half your library. It's hard to not run a target spell like that when it hits half of somebody's library. And Cut Your Losses is casualty too. So after you cast Cut Your Losses and you sacrifice a creature with power 2 or greater, you get to mill 2 people, half their library, just gone. Like, it's so many cards. Cut Your Losses could mill like 80 cards, 90 cards. Like, that's kind of insane. And then Fleet Swallower and Thracian Mindbreaker also milling half of a library on attack. It's not on combat damage either, it's on attack, which is just, honestly, it's nuts. So like I said before, with the graveyard being such an important part of the deck, I didn't feel like I needed to add a lot of draw. That being said, you still do need some in case you are running low on gas and you need to refill your hand and you run out of stuff to do with the graveyard. These are all the draw effects across the bottom, all the Windfall effects. You already saw Shadowheart, great sacrifice outlet to draw cards. And then Visions of Beyond is Ancestral Recall, but it requires a graveyard to have 20 or more cards in it, which will not be difficult with this deck. And then Sphinx of the Second Sun. It's an extra turn spell that goes off every turn. It just minus a combat. Like Sphinx of the Second Sun, every time I play it, it's probably the reason I win the game, if I win that game. It's just the amount of mana and card draw and upkeep triggers, and it's a 6/6 flying beater, and it also gives your entire team vigilance and blah 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 blah. Like, it's just so ridiculous. It's 8 mana, but if you have 8 mana, you cast it, it's free because you get to untap, and if it's more than 8 mana, you could tap out everything, and then you just netted mana off it. So it's also a ritual if you have more than 8 mana worth of stuff that taps, like arcane signets and lands and stuff. It's just such a ridiculously powerful card, and it's not expensive either. So I have a hard time not running it in all of my blue decks, ramp. It is the most efficient extra turn spell I have ever seen, because for 8 mana you get multiple extra turns. It's actually wild. So because we're in Esper, the ramp is pretty bog standard. I did add Burnished Heart and Soul Simulacrum, which you normally would do, but I think they're extra useful in this deck because of the recursion going on. So these are all the mana rocks. It's, again, typical, just all the signets. Soul Ring, Wayfarer's Bauble. Wayfarer's Bauble, I've said it in every video I put it in. Probably my favorite non-green ramp source, besides, I guess, Soul Ring, because it's like the most powerful one in the format, besides maybe Mana Crypt. But yeah, all these cards are like just so bonkers. I love all the signets. I love how you have their mana filtering, but you like net mana off it. Yeah, these cards are great. And then Burnished Heart and Soul Simulacrum, they're just really good ramp pieces in colorless decks. I mean, you see them everywhere because they're so efficient. Soul Simulacrum being a 4 mana rampant growth kind of sucks, but it's a 2/2 body that draws you a card, makes it suck less. And then Burnished Heart being a 6 mana explosive vegetation does hurt, but it's on a creature body, and you can do 3 mana and 3 mana. So it's 3 mana now, 3 mana later, so you can like invest in it and then you get it back. These cards are fantastic. I run them in every deck that runs any amount of recursion, unless it's green, because there's better ramp spells that you can recur with them. But at the same time, these cards are fantastic, and they should go in almost every deck that doesn't have green. So for the removal, I had to stay away from exile effects, because I want stuff hitting the graveyard. And because of that, you do lose out on some of the best removal, because in Esper, you really get the best removal. It's kind of hard to beat. Other colors just don't have nearly as good, because Orzhov gets ridiculously powerful exile removal, and then when you add blue, you get some good counter spells and stuff. Not running any counter spells, but it makes it really easy to put a removal package together. But when you're running the restriction of you're trying to fill people's graveyards and stuff, you don't get to run the exile stuff, unfortunately. So here's what I decided to put in. So this is the typical removal you'd see me put in a deck. Basically every deck that has blue, I put Pongify Rapid Hybridization in, because it's just too efficient and too powerful. And like the 3/3 your opponents get is always not going to be as powerful as the thing you're removing. So you're happy to get that trade-off. Stroke of Midnight is a 3 mana version, but it leaves it behind a 1/1 and hits a non-land permanent. Kind of nuts. And Generous Gift hits a permanent, but leaves a 3/3 behind. So all of these will leave behind a token, but the token is well worth the price of getting rid of the nonsense you're removing with these cards. The rest of the removal category is these absolute houses. You already saw Dakon, but Void Ren, 3 mana, can't be countered, destroy target non-land permanent. Just ridiculous. The really cool thing about Void Ren is it gets around the ward mechanic, because ward, say creature has ward 2, it's as if it gets targeted by a spell or ability or whatever, you have to pay 2 or else you counter that thing. So Void Ren, because it can't be countered, gets around that, which is awesome. Damn, another phenomenal card. 2 mana removal, 4 mana board wipe. One of the greatest cards flavor-wise that's ever been printed, due to like the Magic card history with like Wrath of God, Damnation, all that stuff. So yeah, Damn is fantastic. Dismantling Wave, probably my favorite removal spell in all of Commander. 3 mana, getting rid of 3 things is an insane rate. And the fact that it's artifact or enchantment is great, because there's a good chance that everyone's going to have an artifact, but the players that have enchantments are usually a lot stronger, so you want to get rid of those. And the fact that it's a 3-for-1 and they don't get anything back, it's not like how Beast Within would drop a 3/3 token or something like that. They don't get anything in return. Yeah, Dismantling Wave, absolutely nuts. And then Vindicate, 3 mana sorcery, destroy target permanent. It's just a worse Void Rend, but at the same time, it's still 3 mana, still hits any permanent, and you could hit a land with it if you really wanted to. Not running a lot of board wipes, but in a deck like this, it's okay to run board wipes because you're trying to fill the graveyard, and you're doing some recursion-y stuff, so it's fine if you clear the board every now and again. The only board wipe here that's worth noting that isn't great, but I decided to run anyways, is Displacement Wave. It returns stuff to people's hands, which you would want stuff if they're going to their graveyard preferably, But with Jace's Archivist, Windfall, and then the Cipher one, you're going to be able to potentially discard all of the cards they just drew or put back into their hand. Yes, you'd be refilling their hand with a bunch of new cards, but at the same time, like, you bounced a bunch of stuff with mana value X or less, and then you can put it all in their graveyard. Maybe it's some good creatures, some other stuff. You can potentially recur it. It makes your stuff bigger. You get your stuff back. Yeah, Displacement Wave, absolutely amazing card. And then Austere Command is just a classic whiteboard wipe that I love running. I didn't add any weird lands to the deck. Because some of the cards have pretty restrictive color costs, I want a mana base that can get all of the colors when you need it, which means a lot of ramp spells, a lot of fetching lands, not the OG fetches, things like Evolving Wilds and Broker's whatever hideout, and the Streets of New Capenna fetches and stuff like that, just so you make sure you have your colors. I try to say it in every video that has a multicolored commander, but please, Wizards, put the Battle Bonds lands in all of the multiplayer products. Those lands were designed for multiplayer format, and it'd be really great. The community would absolutely jump for joy if you started putting the Battle Bonds lands inside the precons, just because that's the format they're designed for, honestly. Azorius Chancery and the rest of the bounce lands help hit your land drops, and they kind of draw you a card, air quotes around that. It mentions Broker's Hideout, just more fetching stuff. And then, because a lot of the color restrictions are pretty restrictive, I did add some of the Signet lands, like Darkwater Catacombs, just so you can get the mana fixing when you need it. So when you're making a mill deck, you have a lot of options, especially when you have blue. And so when you come to that, you really have to decide what you want to do with the mill and what cards you're going to cut. And I hope you agree with the cards I decided to cut, but if you don't, let me know down in the comments. So these are some of the cards. They just represent groups of cards I didn't want to add. Swords of Plowshares represents just like exiling removal that I didn't want. Teferi's Tutelage, it's a target opponent mills, which I know it's whenever you draw, so it happens often. At the same time, it is target opponent. If I had more wheels and it was a more wheel-centric deck, I'm sure Teferi's Tutelage could go off. But with the fact that I'm only running 3 wheels, sure, one of them is repeatable. I didn't think it was going to be that super necessary. Likeness Looter. Looting effects can be really strong, but I'd rather just run stuff like Ghoul Caller Gisa and get more mill going. I want to put Geth in the deck. I really like Geth. I think he's really awesome. I bought the Ology Falconwrath precon back in the day, and it came with Geth and Crick, and those cards were like ridiculous. I had a Crick deck for the longest time. I'm finally getting rid of it because Crick is just too strong, and I don't like how powerful the deck is. It kind of, when I play it, I always play poorly on purpose, just so that I don't run away with the game, because it runs so much removal and the deck is so fast with how much mana cheating you're doing, and your life total is bouncing up and down and up and down, and you take out people with commander damage because you give Crick unblockable and stuff like that. And I originally had Geth in that deck, but then it's like, oh, Geth doesn't really do anything, so I took him out. Yeah, I've always wanted to like either make a Geth EDH deck, like make him as the commander. I don't know how that would go, or just find a deck that he goes in very well. Either way, I think Geth is very cool. And then Mind Funeral, again, another target mill card. Just not running them because of what I said before. Lightning Greaves, not running any protection. Whisper Silk Cloak, again, not running any protection. I could see maybe Whisper Silk Cloak, because if you get commander big enough, throw Whisper Silk on it, could be a one-shot kill, but I want to do other stuff with it. Rite of Consumption's a one-off version of one of the other sacrifice effects to deal damage with your commander. It's a very awesome card, but because it's a one-off effect, I would have rather had one of the other cards where I cast my commander on the next turn. Its power and toughness is whatever, sacrifice it, and then cast my commander again, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff, which is very cool. Again, not running Serra Avatar because of the restrictive mana cost, and at the same time there's a different version of the card that's arguably better. It also doesn't go into the graveyard, it shuffles away, which is unfortunate. It makes it so you can't recur it, which kind of sucks, but oh well. And then Revenant is, I'm only running one card. that is power and toughness equal to number of creature cards in your graveyard, but that's because you can scavenge it out and put a bunch of 1/1 counters on the commander or something else. All of the other kind of Lurgoyf cards that have a power and toughness equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, I'm not running like a huge number of creatures, so those cards just wouldn't work very well, and I'm more reliant on my opponents having creatures in their deck. So that's the deck. Let me know what you think. I'm really happy with it. I've always wanted to make a mill deck. I've been, every now and again, I'll kind of like hop onto a deck building app and I'll throw together the Phoenix God of Deception. I'll throw together like a Dimir mill deck that has a bunch of creatures with big butts, and then by the time I'm like halfway through the deck, I'm like, I don't really want to do this, and then I'll throw the deck away and I'll be like, alright, whatever, and then a couple months later, maybe a year later, be like, oh, I kind of want to go back to mill, see what I can do with that, and then I'll get through the deck and I'm like, man, I'm just really not feeling it. But I like really felt it with this deck. I really think this deck's really cool. I like what it's doing. I like how the mill feeds into itself, making the creatures bigger. Yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments. What would have you added or removed, or would you have chose a different commander for this deck? These are all my social media. Twitch is where I stream. I'll be away for anywhere from like 2 weeks to a month. So I won't be streaming for a while, but when I get back, I'll be streaming Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday again like normal, 12 to 4 p.m. Atlantic time. Twitter is when I post when I'm going live and when these videos go up. In the new year, when I get back from my vacation, I'm going to start making TikTok content. I kind of know what I'm going to be doing there. It's going to be really awesome. I'm also going to post them as YouTube Shorts over here, because why not? Reddit, I'm going to start putting those TikTok and YouTube Shorts over on Reddit as well, because I think they might have a home there, maybe. And then Architect and Moxfield is where you find all my deck lists. So thanks for watching, and as always, get building, splainers. Alright, that is so